Yo guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. Making a video today with my new little mini LMT. I ran it real quick last night. I couldn't wait, you know, like a kid on Christmas. I had to open it up and run it. A lot of fun, runs great. No issues so far, but I wanted to make this video because I have noticed a few guys having some minor issues. Mainly, I think, just quality control stuff with these. A couple guys on the Facebook groups have had noticed a couple issues. Some issues with the rear diff for whatever reason, but could just be an assembly thing. I want to actually take mine apart now in this video and show you guys how to do that and how to check it, just on the off chance that it does need to be shimmed a little bit better, or I don't know if it's shimmed at all from the factory, but I want to take a quick look at that because that's, you know, there's a lot of strain on that, especially with these bigger wheels on this little mini. But yeah, let me take it a little bit further. I'm going to actually pull off the entire rear axle, pull it apart. Even though I'm not having issues, I do notice if you hold both wheels here and you kind of try to rotate the drive shaft, you could feel that little bit of play in there, and that is actually your gear mesh between the ring and the pinion gear inside your rear axle here. It just feels like there's a teeny bit more play on the rear than in the front. I just want to pull it apart and inspect it and just see if there are shims in there. Are they incorrectly? Do I need to add a shim? What size are they? I don't even know. We'll find out. So I'm gonna pull this rear axle off and I'll show you guys how to do that. Yeah, so I'll bring you guys in closer here and I'm gonna show you, I'll just start off. I'm gonna take the rear wheels off and that's a 5.5, I believe. What do we got here? Yep, 5.5, but they give you the wheel nut wrench that comes standard with pretty much every RC. So I'm gonna pull the wheels off just to get better access to this, and I think we gotta pull these ends off to slide the axles out anyway to get into the diff. So let me do that and I'll get you guys in closer here so you can see what I'm doing. So let's take these wheels off here. Alright, so pretty nice. These use the threaded pin screws on the wheel hexes as well, which is nice. All right, so wheels are off. I'm gonna pull off these links. You know, actually I'm going to remove the shocks first. And already I can see like some of this hardware, like this screw, either on assembly, it's already feeling like it's kind of a little stripped out on the head. So that's why, you know, maybe spend a little extra money and get a good driver, because if the hardware isn't the greatest to begin with, and then your driver isn't the greatest to begin with, you could end up with some rounded out screws. So that's that. We're gonna have to disconnect the little sway bars. Let's see. All right, so these are slightly longer. Yeah, I'm gonna keep these separate. These are for the links. Slightly longer than for the sway bar. All right, so that's off. So now your drive shaft just pulls apart here, and we now have access to the axle pretty easily. But just, I mean, is this one more long screw, or is this two screws? Let's see. I mean, it's two more screws to pull this rear axle completely off. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do that. So let's set that aside. Here we have the complete rear axle. So let's dig in. So what I'm thinking is just these 6 screws here, but let's see what happens. I don't know that I really need to separate the actual axle to get this apart. I might have to pull these ends off, but yeah, most likely, because the full-size LMT actually has like a 3-piece design. This one looks like it's all one centerpiece, so it means I'm probably going to have to pull the hexes off, get to these 4 screws, slide those off, and then this should separate. But let's see. You know. Okay, so yeah, this hex pin does not want to come out, so I'm just going to kind of push it from the other side a little bit. and there came out. So yeah, the head on that one, I don't know. I mean, when they tightened it, they probably over tightened it a little bit. Save a little bit of time here. I am going to switch over to my driver. I'm just going to put the clutch on 1, so it's going to slip a little bit. Oh damn, that's a long screw. Really glad I switched to this. Pop that one over there. And now we got these 6 screws here that hold the this little flathead countersunk style on the ends, and then the center use this little cap head style. So just make sure when you put these back together, the ones on the outside are this little a flathead countersunk, and the other ones are a cap head style. So this is something, I don't know how many of you guys are gonna wanna, get into this unless you have a problem, but my recommendation is to what I showed you guys before. Take this, hold your wheels and try to move your axle back and forth. If there's an excessive amount of play in there, you might wanna pull this apart to check it. I mean, these are the last screws in here, so. What else is holding it together? Now will you come apart? What's holding this together? Oh, these are the lower suspension link mounts. Those screws are, you see how the axle is split down the whole center, so those need to come out. So the other stuff I just took off, not so much. So here we go. I mean, unless there's hidden screws behind. Oh man, and there are. Check that out. So with the sway bar links, because I took out the screws apart at the top, there's a hidden screw behind this link. You gotta be kidding me. So if you're gonna disconnect the sway bars, just disconnect them from the axle. Oh, and then of course they put a nut on the backside. So that's always fun. And that's actually, I'm gonna grab just a needle nose to hold that. So man, you gotta pull every little thing apart to get to this. And let me just put this back in here. So I would guess both of these dog bones are the same length, so you don't have to go crazy side to side. There really is not much grease in here, which would explain why the rear diff seemed a little bit more open than the front. And let's just see. Okay, so what's nice here, this is a big mistake that happens a lot, is if you go to rebuild this entire rear axle and you have your diff flipped over like this, it's actually going to, your rear wheels are gonna run the opposite direction than your front, and it's not good. But what's nice is they put this little standoff, like molded into the plastic there, so you cannot put this in the wrong way. It won't sit in there. So what I've done on other cars that don't have that, which is super annoying, is I'll just put a little mark. I'll put a little X here on the side where the ring gear goes to not make that mistake. So yeah, but here we have the rear differential, and you can see there's not much grease in there. I mean, so here's the thing, it's gonna fling off anyway. If you're gonna use grease, you gotta use something that is extremely tacky and is gonna stick in there. So something that is actually made for a differential is probably gonna work the best. If you wanna even do that, I don't know how much you're gonna wanna go and tighten this up. But it really depends on what you're driving and your driving style. But I'm probably gonna pack a little bit of extra diff grease in here. But what I really wanted to look at more than anything, so there's a whole bunch of stuff going on in here, guys. here's your other. So there's essentially no grease in this rear diff. Whatever little bit there was, completely flung out. It almost seems like they just put a tiny bit around the outside here and they didn't really do anything internally. Now, whether or not that was on purpose, I don't really know. Did they want the rear to be more open than the front? The front definitely seems a little bit more resistance, but not much. My main thing was I wanted to check the clearance between your the pinion gear here and the ring gear. So let's just put this back together. I already have it the wrong way. So you could see it's pretty obvious how this goes back together. You just want to have these notches here for your shock mounts to line up and stuff. We got a little bit of play here, but that's not necessarily a big deal. The toughest part is figuring out exactly what shims you'll need, if any. So side to side play with these bearings in here. I'm just going to show you guys here. If you press down on here, I mean, it's minimal. There's the teeniest little bit. So if anything, you could probably fit a shim between that bearing and the the ring gear here to force it over against the pinion. But I don't know. I got to see if I even have any. Let's take a look and see if there are even any shims in there to begin with. So that would be on this side. It appears that there is. I'm just going to pull this little out drive just comes off of the pin, and then we have a bearing. So yes, there is a shim. There's a larger spacer. I'm gonna try not to drop this. So there is a larger black spacer, and then there is a thin silver shim. And I'll try to get a size on that. The opposite side only has, I don't know if it's gonna pick up, but the opposite side only has that black spacer, no shim. There is a shim on this side, which would force the ring gear tighter against the pinion, which is good. Let me see if I can get a size on this thing. The internal dimension is 5'7", so like a 5x7 shim, and it's very thin. So what I'm gonna say is that if you take yours apart and you're gonna do the grease or whatever, just check and make sure this shim is in here. I'm gonna see if I have anything lying around that would even fit here, just if I wanted to add a second one and just see how the mesh is with that. I have a feeling that mine is probably okay because there wasn't a ton of movement in there. But I'm wondering if some of these shims are not installed for any of the guys, a handful of guys that did have issues. Again, I don't know that this is a huge problem. I'm just saying, like, if you're gonna take this apart, you might as well check this and make sure that it's there. Okay guys, so what I'm gonna be using in my rear diff is this, it's a Kyosho 5000 weight diff grease. I'm going with this just because it's a known number here. I know if I just add random grease, I don't really know what I'm putting in there. So, and again, because this is, but look, if you have grease lying around, you wanna throw something in here, that's gonna be fine. So if you pull that apart there, you'll see your little spider gears. That's where you really want to get this this grease in here. And is there a good way to do it? I don't know, but we're just going to do this. Rotate it a bit. And inevitably this grease is going to kind of get everywhere inside of here, so it's also going to lubricate the ring and pinion. And you can kind of just continue rotating it and packing a little bit more in here. Wipe it around the edges and just kind of squeeze it in with your fingers. This is a very light grease. I mean, 5,000 is pretty light, but on this scale, guys, and I'm just gonna go ahead because like I said, I know this is gonna fling off and essentially end up lubricating everything in here. I'm just gonna go ahead and use the same grease on my ring and pinion gear here. And, you know, like I said, just the thickness of this grease on the gears is probably going to help take up any little bit of slop remaining. So let's go ahead and reassemble this. That feels nice and smooth now. I mean, just adding that grease, I think, really made a difference. Just to make my life slightly easier, I'm going to line these up now. I don't know, they'll probably fall out, honestly. Whatever, we'll figure it out. All right, let's get this sucker back together. So, again, the little tapered screws go in behind sway bar links. And for this, I definitely recommend just doing it by hand. A little risky to be running these in with a driver. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and put all of this stuff back off camera, just because this is gonna take a little while. Okay, so rear axle back together, and again, I went ahead and added some Kyosho 5000 weight diff grease to the diff, and it feels pretty good. It's definitely a noticeable difference. You could go, if you want this to be a little bit more locked up, I mean, put whatever grease you want. I did notice that there is a shim right on the external between the drive shaft and the output shaft here. There is a little tiny shim there, and then there was a shim on the inside between the bearing and the ring gear. One shim. So what I'm thinking is if anyone's having issues, maybe one or both of those shims are missing. Okay, so that is the rear diff taken care of. Didn't make a huge difference. You might, again, if you're looking for something a little more locked up, I'd recommend going much thicker than this. You could use some type of like a tacky marine grease or something. I mean, this definitely feels a lot smoother and a lot better, but didn't make a gigantic difference in terms of the diff action here, but it definitely feels way smoother. And I also noticed just by greasing that ring and pinion, it just feels like there's a little bit less slop in. It feels a little bit more matched to the front now. So one other thing I'm gonna recommend checking, along with the screw pins that hold the drive shafts to the axles, there's also a screw pin that holds it to the center output here too. And to get to those, you need to remove this little center cover. And there are also gears in here that you guys might want to just double check the grease. This is an area that might just need to be cleaned out once in a while. You'll see the little drive gear in there. And what this is your, from your motor through the push drive and the transmission, it's this little final output shaft that uses a little bevel gear that transfers the energy, that transfers the power from the bevel gear into another ring gear that turns your axles. So this is a locker in here. There is no differential. This is just locked up. There's only a front and rear diff, but you have these little access ports here, the little hole there that you can get a driver down into the pin screws that hold your drive shaft to the locker, essentially, right? So if you just rotate them, and let's just see how tight they are. So again, it was pretty tight. Yeah, I mean, these are nice and tight. So you can see they did put some grease in there. It kind of did fling off. I'm just gonna use the same grease that came in there and just kind of reapply it to the correct area on the gears, just to make sure that everything is working nice and smooth. And you know, if you guys go running these things through puddles and water and stuff, you're gonna wanna check this pretty often to make sure, I mean, water's gonna get in here. It is not sealed up. You're gonna wanna make sure this thing stays nice and greased, you know, and clean. So that's a little better. I can hear the grease flinging around in there. So you see, there's a decent amount of grease. They did a good job greasing it. But most of it was no longer on the teeth. So they might just take a dab and slap it in there. Just make sure that's all done. And again, double check your the little pin screws that go into the drive shafts. Mine were tight. It felt like there was a good amount of resistance backing them out, so I'm just gonna leave them. I don't think that's something I'm gonna mess with right now. But every once in a while, you might wanna just check those things. Just take a peek. You can see if they're starting to back out. So let me slap this cover back on. Quality control passed. Okay, so that's that. So I'm pretty confident that the drivetrain, of course I didn't check the front. The front feels very smooth and actually feels like it's greased better than the rear was. So I don't think I want to go through that again just to check this. If I have an issue, of course I will pull it apart.